I'm telling you to get out.
My husband yelled, glaring at me. Finally, we were going to divorce. I almost sighed. With a faint smirk, he added,
You're defective and no longer of any use.
I wasn't angry anymore, but just deeply disappointed.
I've got a woman who'll have my child, so don't worry about me.
He then left me and remarried his affair partner. Now, take a look at the miserable ending of such a man. My name is Maya. I'm a 35-year-old stay-at-home wife currently trying to have a baby. My husband, Alex, is 2 years older than me. He works as a pharmacist at a chain pharmacy nearby. Before we got married, I was also a pharmacist and we worked at the same place. Our relationship started after his relentless pursuit finally wore me down. About a year later, we got married. However, since I had trouble conceiving, Alex insisted I quit my job to focus on having a baby. Honestly, I would have preferred continuing to work while waiting for a pregnancy to happen naturally, but he was so adamant that I reluctantly resigned. After quitting, I tried even harder to maintain a healthy lifestyle, planning meals and ensuring everything was perfect for both of us. Alex, to his credit, was involved too. He recorded my temperature every morning and joined me in exercising. We were both looking forward to the day we'd finally have a child, but that day never came. At first, Alex was kind and encouraging, but a year after my resignation, he started getting irritable and I felt the pressure mounting.
This month, it didn't work out either.
When I reported that, Alex let out a loud, exaggerated sigh. I was upset at his lack of empathy, but I held myself together and said,
Let's try again next month.
However, what came out of his mouth next was really awful.
Isn't it because of your age? This is probably the result of your careless lifestyle up until now. How can you call yourself a stay-at-home wife when you can't even take care of yourself properly?
He said so, and then came the kicker.
You quit work to focus on having a baby, and yet nothing's happening? That's not normal. You're an only child, right? It's gotta be genetic. Your parents must have passed down a low fertility rate.
I was absolutely stunned. Blaming me for our fertility issues without any evidence and even insulting my parents was unacceptable. Since he had accused me like that, I decided we should settle this once and for all, suggesting we both get tested for infertility. Though, Alex refused.
That's a waste of money. I've got a sister, and my relatives are all popping out kids. It's impossible for me to be the problem.
Therefore, I went alone to have a test. The results said there were no abnormalities. This proved that infertility was not my fault. When I told Alex about that, he dismissed it, saying,
The test must be wrong.
And he even criticized me.
What a waste of money. You're such an expensive woman.
Then he added,
If we move in with my parents, we could save on rent and utilities, and you'd have more help around the house. Maybe then you'd finally get pregnant.
To be honest, I didn't feel like living with my in-laws since I couldn't stand them. Every time I visited, they treated me like a housekeeper and forced me to listen to endless stories about their glory days and struggles. Eventually, my father-in-law would end our conversation with,
Hurry up and give us a grandchild.
Trying to have a baby under that kind of stress was impossible, and living with them was far more out of the question. In fact, his parents lived about 2 hours away, which would be quite far from Alex's workplace and the fertility clinic I planned to go to. I used that as an excuse to decline Alex's offer. However, Alex pushed back, saying I could transfer to a clinic closer to their place and that he'd request a transfer to a nearby pharmacy. When I reminded him,
Breaking our lease would cost a penalty since we couldn't move for another year.
He finally dropped it. For a moment, I was relieved that his stinginess worked in my favor, but I knew it was only a matter of time before he brought it up again. I started questioning whether it was worth continuing our efforts to have a child. From then on, Alex began avoiding me altogether, and he stopped participating in our efforts to conceive. In fact, he spent more and more nights away, citing overtime and business trips. One day, out of the blue, Alex announced that he was relocating for work on his own. He claimed he had requested a transfer to a pharmacy near his parents' house. Instead of living with his parents, he planned to rent an apartment by himself. This seemed odd, especially for Alex, who's notoriously cheap. Why would he spend money on an apartment? From that moment, I started feeling that something was off. I asked him to decline the transfer, but he stubbornly insisted.
It's impossible unless I move alone. That's final.
Without waiting for my approval, he started making preparations and left the house with a smug and almost relieved expression. Once Alex started his solo assignment, he completely cut off contact, ignoring my calls. He didn't bother coming home, even during his time off. 6 months later, a young woman I'd never seen before showed up at my house. She looked to be in her late 20s.
Hi, I'm Alex's girlfriend. I got here earlier than expected.
She said with a smile. Barely a few minutes passed before Alex himself walked in.
Oh, you got here earlier than me.
He said so casually and then picked up his phone to make a call. After his call, I confronted him.
What's going on here?
I asked so, but he refused to answer. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. It was Alex's parents.
Did you invite them?
In front of everyone here, I'm telling the truth. I'm divorcing Maya and marrying someone who can have my child. This woman is pregnant, so you're no longer needed, Maya. Get out of here now.
He thrust divorce papers at me while spouting this nonsense.
Wait a minute. Is she pregnant? What do you mean? Are you saying you cheated on me? For the record, I'm not infertile.
I fired off questions, completely baffled. Before Alex could respond, his mother jumped in.
You're a woman who can't have children, so just leave quietly.
What is going on? Explain this.
When I turned back to Alex and demanded so, his father then intervened.
It doesn't matter. We're finally getting the grandchild we've always dreamed of. Maya, the best thing you can do is leave.
I tried to reason with them, saying,
I'm speaking with Alex, not you two. Why are you even getting involved?
Alex sighed loudly.
Ugh, enough already. There's nothing to discuss. There's no child involved, so at least you don't have to worry about custody or child support. Just sign the papers and leave. It's that simple. Now hurry up and get out.
Why are you suddenly saying all this?
I shouted before Alex could reply, and his mistress spoke up.
Wow, this is why older women are such a hassle. Why not just leave right away? It's your fault you couldn't have a baby. Oh, but I'll even give you time to put on makeup before you leave. No way you're stepping outside without it, right?
She smirked at me, her words dripping with sarcasm. Alex added,
You're defective. That's all there is to it.
He had the nerve to call me defective while ignoring his own shortcomings. I wasn't angry anymore, but just deeply disappointed.
Fine. I'll sign the papers.
I said so, standing up and grabbing a pen. Alex and his mistress watched me with smug expressions. His parents looked at me like I was something filthy. These clueless people would regret this someday, but that didn't matter to me. I couldn't care less anymore. I grabbed the divorce papers and signed them hastily.
I'll leave for now, but anything I can't take with me will be picked up later by a moving company.
I packed a small bag and left the house. I called my parents, who who lived far away. After I got married, I'd only visited them a few times. Even though it was a sudden call, my parents kindly said,
Come home right away.
I spent one night at a hotel and returned to my parents' house the next morning. 1 month later, Alex called me.
Hey, what's this about alimony?
He sounded panicked. In fact, I had consulted an attorney and filed for alimony. It seemed that Alex had just received the documents.
I'm not paying anything. You should be the one paying alimony.
He started spewing nonsense. I realized arguing with him was pointless. After letting him rant for a while, I calmly said,
I have an attorney handling this. Please refrain from contacting me directly.
Then, I hung up and blocked him on my phone and all other communication channels. It felt liberating to know I'd never have to hear his insults again. A few days later, Alex showed up at my parents' house. What was he doing here? The very sight of him made my skin crawl. I didn't even want him stepping inside, so I met him outside on the porch. Despite living with his new wife, he claimed he was already considering divorce. The reason was obvious.
Well, why are you telling me this?
Can't we try again? Marrying her made me realize how good I had it with you.
What are you talking about? That's ridiculous.
Don't say that. A little time apart hasn't changed how much I love you, has it?
His absurd plea made me chuckle in disbelief.
You're smiling now. That means you forgive me, right?
Excuse me? Don't be stupid.
I was about to lose my patience, but then an idea came to me.
By the way, that mistress of yours, what was her name again? Sarah, wasn't it?
Wait, how do you know her name? She didn't introduce herself back then.
Alex looked genuinely shocked that I knew her name.
Well, I know quite a lot of things.
Alex's expression turned sour to hear that.
As for that woman, she can't have kids, can she? Isn't that why you're here begging to get back together?
How do you know that? How much do you know?
In fact, I'd suspected she wasn't pregnant even on the day he demanded a divorce. Actually, the moment I started feeling uneasy about his solo assignment, I hired a private investigator to look into it. He took some photos, which showed her drinking alcohol with another man at a bar. Apparently, while Alex was working during the day, she was out with different men almost every day. No pregnant woman would drink that much. I laid it all out for Alex. Defeated, he finally started complaining about her. She had a notorious reputation for sleeping around. As a result, she contracted a disease that made natural conception nearly impossible. She loved dating different men but was also desperate to get married, which is why she targeted Alex for his stable income as a pharmacist. When you told me to get out, you didn't listen to a word I had to say. I just did what you told me to do.
If you told me back then, I wouldn't be in this mess.
His voice dropped to a pathetic whine, as if he were the victim. I was furious to hear that and shouted, You cheated, and now you want pity? You're the one to blame. Then I slammed the door shut, yelling, I don't care about you anymore. Don't ever come near me again. Even after I closed the door, he kept ringing the doorbell and shouting insults. It was so out of control that I called the police. Soon, 2 officers arrived and escorted him away. 20 years passed. One day, while shopping in a busy part of the city, I heard someone call out to me. To my surprise, it was Alex. After 2 decades, he was wearing ill-fitting clothes, his hair was a mess, and he looked much older than his age. While aging is natural, he looked particularly unkempt.
Being single is lonely, huh? Even on holidays, you have no choice but to hang out with a younger coworker.
Even then, his tone was still condescending. However, standing next to me wasn't a younger coworker but my child. That was the daughter I gave birth to and raised with all my love and care. After learning I wasn't infertile, that was the last time I had any intimacy with Alex. However, miraculously, I got pregnant that final time. At first, I hated the idea of having his child, but amidst the chaos of his solo assignment, our divorce, and the move, I didn't realize I was pregnant until it was too late for a termination. It was a life I was given, and I decided to raise her as my own, giving her everything I had. In front of Alex, I said to my daughter,
This is your dad, genetically, at least.
My daughter, who had already pieced it together, hesitated before smiling and greeting him.
Nice to meet you.
What did you say? I am her dad? This is my kid. What's going on?
His eyes widened in shock.
Yes, genetically, she's our child.
No way. You were supposed to be infertile. She must be a stepchild from a remarriage. Or did you adopt her as a single mom?
Remember the test? It showed I wasn't infertile. This child is mine, and I gave birth to her. If you don't believe me, just check the birth certificate. I understand you don't know about this because you never cared to check.
Hearing that, Alex stared at her and muttered,
Sure, she does kind of look like my mom.
His expression softened as he took in her beauty and grace. Then, he was emboldened and said,
Let me walk her down the aisle at her wedding.
without missing a beat. My daughter responded,
That's not happening. You won't be invited to my wedding. Besides, I don't even know if I ever get married. I'll make sure I don't end up with a man like you.
Alex's face fell as he turned to glare at me.
What did you tell her about me? You've been bad-mouthing me, haven't you?
He yelled, drawing the attention of shoppers around us. My daughter calmly told him to lower his voice and then said,
No one ever told me anything about you. I was only told that you and Mom divorced because your personalities didn't match. But when I was in middle school, I found Mom's diary. That's when I understood what kind of man you are, and meeting you today confirms that you're a terrible person.
Alex was left speechless. Then my daughter turned to me and said, her voice filled with gratitude,
If I'd grown up with him, I might have had terrible standards for men and ended up with someone awful. Thank you for divorcing him and raising me so well. I'm so grateful, Mom.
I was truly glad I gave birth to my beloved daughter and raised her with care. I felt so grateful that she grew up to be such a kind, wise, and thoughtful child who would deeply care for me. On the other hand, Alex slumped his shoulders, seemingly humiliated, and walked away without saying goodbye. Later, I heard updates about Alex from former coworkers. Apparently, he was still with the woman he cheated with, but they hadn't had any children. His arrogance caused problems at every workplace, leading to frequent transfers. His partner struggled to adjust to each new location and became a lazy recluse. Looking back, I have no doubt that divorcing Alex was the right decision. Life wasn't always easy, but raising my daughter on my own was worth every challenge. She's my precious treasure, my best friend, and my biggest supporter. She's now a grown and accomplished adult. Still, I want to stay healthy and do my best so I can quietly support and help her whenever she needs me. I'll continue to pour my love into her as much as ever in the years to come. While she doesn't have any immediate plans to marry, I hope she finds a happy marriage someday. I sincerely hope my daughter never crosses paths with a man like Alex and that she won't be deceived by anyone. If she ever faces infertility struggles, I deeply wish for her and her partner to tackle the treatments together. I hope they support each other through it without placing blame or burden on one another.